The Steelers finished the 2019 NFL season with a disappointing 8-8 record, getting second in the AFC North and missing out on the postseason. And coming into 2020, there weren't high expectations for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they started off the season with a really impressive 11-0 record. And they look like one of the strongest teams in the league, led by their suffocating defensive line and their really high-powered passing offense. But now in the past 2 weeks in a row, they've lost both their games, falling to an 11-2 record and being second in the AFC now. So what is wrong with the Steelers, and are they really flukes, and what will happen to the rest of the season? I'm going to be talking about all of those in today's video. What's up everybody, it's AC Analysis. Like I said in the intro, today I'm going to be talking about what is wrong with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and how come they've lost 2 games in a row. And they started the season with a really strong 11-0 record, really led by head coach Mike Tomlin and their suffocating defense that was number 1 in the NFL in scoring and points allowed. So, like I said, they were one of the best teams in the league, but now they have fallen off, and there are many problems that I can think of that is the reason for them falling off, and showing that they're really not as good as their record says. But before we get started, if you guys enjoy consistent football content, liking and subscribing would be really helpful. We're on the road to 100 subs now, and every sub helps. And the shoutout for today's video goes to Throwdown Sports. He makes a cool variety of NFL and NBA montages, and you guys should really check him out. And if you guys want a chance to get your channel shouted out, make sure to comment down below, and we can help all of our channels grow together. And with that being said, let's get right into the video. Before we talk about what went wrong for the Steelers, I want to talk about what has gone so right for them, and that is Keith Butler's defense. He's the defensive coordinator of the Steelers, and he's made this team one of the scariest defenses in the league, and mainly their pass rush and their defensive line, which mainly consists of TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, and Casey Hayward. TJ Watt's currently up there and front runner for Defensive Player of the Year with 46 tackles, 12 sacks, and an interception. He's always the one getting double covered, and he is a great defensive lineman. But him playing there also makes players like Bud Dupree better, who people originally thought was a bust. But this season he has 31 tackles and 8 sacks. Currently he's had an ACL injury and he's out for the season. I'm going to talk about that later. But then there's also Cameron Hayward, the veteran who has become one of the best players on this team, and is a player that people also want to double cover, but they're not able to because of TJ Watt. And this team is currently the number 1 blitzing team in the league, and they really help get the quarterback since they're currently leading the league in sacks. And their defense is doing great, but let's talk about their offense for a second. The offense for the Pittsburgh Steelers was an offense that people did not expect to do really anything in the NFL this season, but they've actually come out to be one of the most high-powered offenses for the first 11 weeks at least, mainly being led by Ben Roethlisberger and Chase Claypool, their young rookie phenom wide receiver, who so far this season has 644 receiving yards, while Big Ben has 3,200 passing yards and Deontay Johnson's at 700 receiving yards. And the passing game was the real threat, giving them a good average 25 points a game, and showing that their offense was really capable of winning games. And then the run game too. For the first 8 weeks of their NFL season, the running game had a total of 8 touchdowns and over 500 rushing yards, mainly led by James Conner, who this year has had some lingering injury problems which has really slowed him down, but he still has 25 receptions, 5 touchdowns, and 700 rushing yards, being still one of the elite running backs in the NFL. But the past few weeks, the running game has really slowed down. They've only scored 2 touchdowns, and they have not been able to, play as well as they used to be playing, which I'll also be talking about later in the video about what's gone wrong for the team. But Mike Tomlin really changed this offense, and also Big Ben, I do believe, will win Comeback Player of the Year, because he came off of a pretty horrible last season in which he was injured for most of the year, and now he's led his team to an 11-2 record, previously 11-0. But the offense is another big threat of the team that I believe not enough people are talking about because of the past 2 weeks that they have played. One thing I've heard a lot about the Steelers is that they're playing really well because they have a very easy schedule, and that is understandable. I understand why they have an easy schedule. It's because they had an average season last year, so they get an average schedule this season. But the thing is, you can't bash them on that since they have beat some really good teams. For example, they beat the Browns 38-7. They beat the Titans barely. They barely beat the Ravens. And so they've still played some really good teams, and the only game that they really crushed in, though, was their game against the Browns. But yeah, they've also barely won games against teams that they should have absolutely destroyed, like the Broncos, for example, the Texans, the Eagles. So I don't believe that the Steelers are as good as people say they are, purely because they're not winning the games as good as an 11-0 team should win. At the end of the day, they are winning the games, and that's what matters. They're basically the opposite of the Chargers, who can't win games. But the Steelers, I do not believe, are as good as their record predicts, because they can't win the games and absolutely crush the teams that they should crush. The only games in which they've actually dominated are against the Jaguars, which is understandable, and against the Browns, which was an impressive game. But the Steelers still, at the end of the day, are winning the games, and that is what matters. They are a winning team. The real struggle for the Steelers has happened in the past 5 weeks, and this is the span of time in which they lost their past 2 games in a row. But the reason for this is COVID-19 outbreaks in the team. And many big-name players, like James Conner and Stephon Tuitt, who are really staples to that team, have actually gone out with COVID-19 and have made games go back. And Steelers have had some of the most COVID-19 cases out of any team in the NFL, even to a point where they had to play 3 NFL games in a span of 13 days because of how close games were and how some games were even moved into Wednesday. And then they had to play a game on Wednesday, and then they had to play a game on Sunday right after that. So because of this, keep in mind, an average NFL team will play 3 NFL games in 21 days, but the Steelers had to do it in about half the time. And the first one was mainly against the Jaguars, where they crushed them, but then after that, they were playing another team who were really COVID-riddled, in the Ravens, who were missing Lamar Jackson, and the Steelers barely beat the Ravens. And then this is where the main problem started. Steelers playing against the Washington football team. It was actually a very interesting game in which defenses dominated for the first 3 quarters. But towards the end of the game, Alex Smith rallied up his team, and they made a really impressive last drive, and then the Steelers fumbled at the end of the game, causing them to actually win the game. And this was an absolute upset, since the Washington football team at this moment were a 4-7 team, and everyone, including me, was saying the Steelers were going to win. And then to prove that the Steelers weren't flukes, they had to win against the Bills the very next week. And they had to play a very tough matchup on primetime against Josh Allen and his Bills. And for the first half, the Steelers' defense held up, holding Josh Allen to only about 20 yards, a fumble, and a pick. But in the second half, Josh Allen also rallied back, scoring 26 points. So I think the main problem for this team right now is that they are being worn out with COVID-19 cases, and with them having to, lose games very closely at the end. But 13 days and playing 3 games is absolutely unbearable for the human body, and I just understand why they played bad for this time, but they really should have beat the football team. So now, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are already dealing with many COVID-19 cases, causing their games to be pushed back or moved forward, and wearing out the team, also has to deal with a ton of injuries to their starting lineup, and mainly to their defense, who is still one of the best defenses in the league and one of the most flexible defenses in the league, even after all these injuries. Examples are Joe Hayden, who's out with a concussion, one of the best cornerbacks in the league. Another example is Bud Dupree, who was having a career year this season, and was actually showing that he had a good chance in the NFL, is currently on injured reserve with an ACL tear. Devin Bush, who was put in to replace Ryan Shazier, is out for the rest of the season, and he is one of the best linebackers and young linebackers in the NFL, so that did hurt the team. And then even on the offense, their backup running back Trey Edmonds, and they're also missing many offensive linemen for many games. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are dealing with so many injuries, and especially their linebacking core, which is one of the strengths of this team. Their only starting linebacker left was the recently signed Avery Williamson, who signed from the Jets. And Avery Williamson's having actually a very, very good season for the team, but he's the only real starting linebacker left, since their other linebackers are out for the rest of the season. So the real strength of this team, their blitzing linebackers, are now gone. They still have their defensive line, but they're not as strong. And then already on the offensive side of the ball, they're missing many offensive linemen, and this team is being absolutely hammered by injuries. And their most injuries actually happened in their game against the Washington football team, in which they actually lost because they were missing many key players on the offensive line and many players on the defense, causing Alex Smith to be able to win the game. So I do believe that if they did not have that many injuries, they would actually still currently be 13-0. In conclusion, do I think that the Steelers are an overrated and bad football team? No, I think that they're a very good top 5 football team in the NFL, and they deserve their record. I just believe that they should be winning games by more at this point. They've just gotten really unfortunate with many COVID-19 outbreaks. I believe it's 3 at this point, and they've had many injuries to some superstars on their team that really do affect the games. But coming up for the rest of their schedule, they have a tough game against the Colts and the Browns, and a should-be easy win against the Bengals. So the team that is currently 11-2, I see them actually finishing with a 13-3 record, being second in the AFC, and actually missing out on the bye. Because not only the first team in the AFC, the number 1 team, actually gets the bye. But the Steelers have had some unfortunate turns of events, and even before they had all these unfortunate events, I do believe they should have won some more games by more, like against the Broncos or against the Eagles. But with that being said, that's all about this video. This has been AC Analysis talking about what is wrong with the Pittsburgh Steelers and are they flukes. And if you guys enjoy videos like these, make sure liking and subscribing will be really helpful. We're on the road to 100 subs now, and every sub helps. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys have any video suggestions, make sure to comment it down below. And see you next time.